Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Crypto Nick. These are three people who are able to take their understanding of technology, economics, and human nature in order to predict the future and ultimately create the future. The crypto world doesn't yet have their Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. We do have our Crypto Nick. He's worked out great so far, but I think it might be a person by the name of Dan Larimer. If you don't know who Dan Larimer is, he is the creator of Steemit, BitShares, and he's currently the CTO, chief scientist, chief architect around the billion-dollar project EOS. But rather than just go through a biography, I want to give you 4 examples of times that Dan was able to seemingly predict the future by understanding the technology, the economics, and the human behavior. We'll go back to those 3 points over and over again in this video. But before we talk about Dan, I want to lay the foundation a little bit with a belief that I have, which is that the creator of these blockchain technologies does not decide what the use of it is. They might try to describe it, but ultimately the use of the blockchain is discovered by the community. The 2 biggest examples of this happen to be the biggest cryptocurrencies in the world, Bitcoin and Ethereum. So let's first talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin, when it was first described by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008, was described as a system of peer-to-peer digital cash. And he imagined a system where it would be used like cash, used like currency. It would bank the unbanked, and it would allow people from anywhere in the world to transact with each other. It was going to have low fees, and it was going to be decentralized, meaning no one had control of the network. So Satoshi was describing not only the technology, but the use for that technology. And what we found over time is that his prediction of how it was going to be used is actually pretty far off. Today, no one's making microtransactions with Bitcoin. You can't do it because of fees. It's not banking any of the unbanked. It's kind of decentralized, but in some ways the emergence of ASICs and mining pools is kind of eroded at that idea of decentralization. And nobody's actually using it as cash or currency. They're not using it to pay for things. Truly what it has become is digital gold. Some people will disagree with that, but I think if you look at how it's actually being used today, HODL memes, people are not wanting to spend this. They're wanting to accumulate it and hoard it in the hopes that it's going to go up in value. This is what people do with gold. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the peer-to-peer cash, bank the unbanked system that Satoshi imagined. And that's kind of the beauty of a decentralized system, right? Is that one person can have an idea for what this technology is going to be used for, but it's up to the collective intelligence of everyone to decide what it's actually going to be used for. That's kind of amazing. Ethereum is another recent example. It was supposed to be smart contracts and decentralized apps. We were going to rebuild the internet on top of the Ethereum blockchain, but it turns out it's pretty much used for ICOs. So some will dispute this and say, Lightning Network, second layer solutions, we haven't realized the full vision yet, or whatever. I'm talking about where we are today. So both of these platforms might change over time, but that kind of makes my point, which is that it's the community that decides the direction it goes, not the creator. But there were a few people who were able to see what the technology is and then predict how the community was going to use it. See the limitations of the technology, predict how communities would work around those limitations and what uses they might find for it. Dan Larimer is one of these people, and so I want to give you 4 examples of when he was able to predict the future. The first is really simple. He was there in 2010. 2010! He says he discovered Bitcoin on his own search for digital currency solutions, trying to solve the same kinds of problems that Satoshi was talking about back then. He was on the Bitcoin Talk forums. He talked with Satoshi. He basically made it his full-time job posting on these forums. So anyone that had the ability to foresee the power of these digital currencies back then, that's kind of an amazing thing. All right, so that one was simple. The second point also comes from the Bitcoin Talk forums, and it's a post in which Dan talks about the scalability issues for Bitcoin. So let's take a look. This was a post from July 2010 talking about scalability and transaction rate. He says, I'm convinced that bandwidth, disk space, and computation time necessary to distribute and finalize a transaction will be prohibitively expensive for micropayments. Consider for a second that the current banking industry is unable to provide a reasonable micropayment solution that does not involve depositing a reasonable sum and only allowing a withdrawal after a reasonable sum has been accumulated. So right off the bat, even like well before there were any scalability problems with the Bitcoin network, he saw that fees and these hardware limitations were going to make micropayments just not possible. And that's the world we're living in today with Bitcoin. He also goes on to say, thus we need bit banks that will allow instant transfers among members and pure banks. Anyone can open a bit bank, but the system would, by necessity, operate on some level of trust. Transfers in and out of the banks and peer-to-peer would still be possible, but would be more costly. To me, that sounds a little bit like the Lightning Network, where we have to put a little bit of trust into the channel we're creating into the Lightning Network, and most likely the channel that we have open is with this like hub and spoke model that's probably going to develop, where there's kind of central authorities, kind of like banks that you open your channel with to get onto the network and then make those peer-to-peer transactions throughout the network. Pretty interesting, pretty interesting. Okay, let's go on to example number 3. In 2014, Dan was working on a project called BitShares, which he saw the need for decentralized exchanges. This was after Mt. Gox had fallen, and he said, hey, we need a place that we don't have to put our trust into this exchange. Let's decentralize it and put it on the blockchain. Now, whether or not that project was a success is kind of beyond the scope of this video. Some would say it wasn't. But one thing he saw as being important to this network was to have a stable currency. A currency that wouldn't fluctuate. Kind of like Tether. In this post from 2014, he talks about the creation of a stable currency. He says every dollar, euro, Bitcoin, and ounce of gold held on the BitShares exchange is backed up by 3 times the reserves of traditional centralized exchanges. The traditional banking system has long practiced what I like to call fictional reserve banking, more commonly known as fractional reserve banking. In the Bitcoin ecosystem, we demand at least 100% reserves. A single hack, mistake, or theft can quickly turn a 100% reserve system into a fractional reserve system, or worse, a no reserve system. Without any reserves, it is unlikely that an exchange can give you the funds it owes you. By always maintaining at least 200% or more of reserves, you can rest assured that BitShares is solvent in almost any market. All the reserves are kept as BitShares, held on the blockchain, blah, 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 blah. Whoa. When I read this, I was pretty blown away. Because not only did he understand that the ecosystem needed a stable coin like that, but he predicted the exact situation that we're currently seeing ourselves in with Tether. All right, the last example goes back to scaling again, this time talking about Ethereum and how scaling relates to not just these transfers of value, but the computation on the network that happens on the Ethereum blockchain. If you've been following cryptocurrency for more than like 6 months or so, then you know about CryptoKitties and what it did to Ethereum. When CryptoKitties came out, it was so popular, it bogged down the entire Ethereum network. CryptoKitties! And the issue was that the network had no way to distinguish between like, this is a CryptoKitties transaction, this is some other type of transaction or computation. It's all treated the same on the blockchain, where you're computing everything. So what I wanted to show was an interview that, well, it's kind of an interview. It's more like Dan asking some tough questions of Vitalik Buterin of Ethereum fame. So let's just roll the clip.
Now, I've been receiving a lot of questions about Ethereum. While I was at the conference, I had an opportunity to ask some questions from Vitalik, one of the lead developers of Ethereum. We got those questions on tape, and I would like to present his answers in this video, and then provide my own commentary on his responses.
How are you going to handle doing everything that all these different blockchains are doing on a single blockchain? It seems like if all you care about is names, all you care about is one smart contract, or all you care about is gambling, why do you have to process all the transactions of the New York Stock Exchange?
Okay, so we actually have there are actually several different levels at which you can integrate your own decentralized application into Ethereum.
So what Dan was describing there was exactly the CryptoKitties situation that wouldn't happen for another 2.5 years. This video came out in April 2014. Ethereum was just proposed a few months ago, and their crowd sale didn't even happen until July and August of 2014. I'll put a link to this video in the description so you can listen to Vitalik's answers and then Dan's critique of those answers, but really his critique comes down to purely a understanding of technology. Remember, at this point, there's no basis that he's working off of. It's all purely theoretical. Ethereum isn't even out yet, and he's identified one of the #1 issues that Ethereum is going to have. Okay, so don't take any of this as a criticism of Bitcoin or Ethereum. Personally, I love both of those projects. About 60% of my investment in cryptocurrencies is in Bitcoin and Ethereum, so I'm a fan of those projects. The point of this video is just to show Dan's pretty remarkable ability to look a few steps forward and see into the future and see the issues that are going to come up as a result of the fundamentals of the technology. So what Dan is doing today is he's working on EOS. You've probably heard of it. They've raised over $1 billion working on this project. It's hugely ambitious. Whether it's going to work out or not, who knows? It might be the biggest flop in the crypto sphere. Personally, I'm very excited about it, and I think Dan is a genius. And I think because of his ability to look forward and see into the future and see the problems with the technology as they arise in the marketplace, he's going to be able to proactively solve those problems on EOS. The other thing I want to just throw in here, this is kind of unrelated to everything else, but something that Dan did that I think is brilliant is that rather than create the generalized platform, the Ethereum, let's say, and then hope the developers are going to come and make all these, decentralized apps on top of it, what he first did is he created this specific program in Steem and BitShares. Now he's working on EOS, which is the generalized platform. And I think that's a better method, because before you can generalize and kind of take this guess as to what the tools the developers are going to need or the scale limitations that they're going to have, you first need to have an example, like a prototype of what this might look like. And that's exactly what Steem is. And I think that's going to pay big dividends to Dan and his team when they're creating EOS. Anyway, that's all I was wanting to cover with Dan. You can take that, absorb it, make your own conclusions. But I thought, what cryptocurrency video is complete without a look at the markets? So let's just real quick take a look at the markets. All right, so as you can see, most of the markets are up, but my personal favorite project, I think it's pretty much over, guys. You can see the initial subscriber offering went off fairly well. I think this was just like a friends and family kind of thing buying in, and then it really tapered off. But once that marketing surge hit and people really started to get interested, there was a huge rise in price. Things were looking up. We were going to the moon, but this just looks like another pump and dump, guys. You see it's falling fast. I don't see this going anywhere. Go ahead and unsubscribe. Get your money out now. It's just another scammy pump and dump. That's it. Anyway, so thanks for watching. I guess it's been a good run. I'll see you later.